Good evening, children. Welcome to the internet's least favourite champagne socialist. And today we're looking at another twofer. It's Rave Dubin with guest little Benny Shapino.
It's super clever. I mean, the argument is completely circular, right? They just say, you're a racist. And you say, well, but you have no evidence of my racism. They say,
Oh god, this little Shapino character speaks way too fast for this. It's giving me a goddamn headache. Just slow down, man. Okay, first of all, the very first sentence out of his mouth includes the proposition, the claim, that somebody calling him racist, and then him saying that there's no evidence to suggest that he's racist. Really? Really, Ben? I think you might be forgetting that what you post on Twitter is still available for everyone to see.
racism. They say, well, you don't even recognize your own racism. You say, well, then how am I racist? They say, because you're complicit in a system of racism. You say, right, but the system isn't racist. Like, you can't point to something that's racist.
Can't point to something that's racist. What the hell? I mean, I don't even know where to start. The thing is that this is such a poorly constructed straw man. I don't even think you could really consider it a straw man. It's more of a kind of ooze man that you can just pass your fingers through for Ben Shapino's fondling pleasure.
No, but it results in racial inequality. And therefore, it is a racist system, and therefore you're complicit in the system, and therefore you're a racist.
I mean, do people actually get some sort of pleasure out of this? Watching Ben Shapiro shadow box, essentially, against imaginary phantoms in his own mind? I mean, it used to be that the right was sort of, we debate anyone, come on, we'll debate you, with her, the open marketplace of ideas, all that kind of stuff. And then slowly they've retreated back to debating unprepared 21-year-olds. And then now it seems that Ben Shapiro sort of folded back even further into just debating imaginary phantoms that can't hit back in any sense. It's kind of pathetic, really. I'd feel sorry for him if he wasn't such an absolute turd.
And you say, okay, well, but all systems perpetuate racial inequality.
All systems perpetuate racial inequality, apparently, with absolutely nothing to back that up whatever. I mean, and even if it was true that, to a certain extent, you could never really fully eradicate racism, which I don't think it's true, but even if it was the case, that's not an argument for or against anything. Who cares? Does that mean that this system isn't appallingly racist? No. Does it mean he's not appallingly racist for supporting it? No. And it's not just living in it, let's be clear about this. It's that Ben Shapiro explicitly supports the most racist and problematic aspects of our civilization and its orbiting bodies.
By even saying that, you're demonstrating your white fragility, which means you're a racist, right? Like, this is basic Salem witch trial. If you sink, then you're innocent, and if you float, then you're a witch.
Well, it's not exactly true, Ben, is it? Because with the Salem witch trials, you only have two options. You have the option to drown and be innocent, or to float and to be a witch. But in this case, you don't just have the option to be racist in one way or racist in another way. There is, in fact, a third path of just not being a racist.
So we've sort of talked about this a little bit before, but do you think there is a fundamental reason for that? That there is a fundamental reason that underlies the philosophy of someone who broadly is on the left versus on the right, that why people on the right are willing to do it? If I put someone on the left on my show, I put Marianne Williamson on, I put on Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, all the people on the right, virtually, who disagree with them say, I disagree with her and him on this and that and the other thing, but I'm glad you had the conversation. If I put you on, or Prager on, the lefties go bananas. I'm endorsing white supremacy and
Well, it's probably got a bit more to do with the fact that you've invited actual white supremacists onto your show, like Milo Yiannopoulos and Stefan Molyneux onto your show, and when they made white supremacist statements, you then nodded your head along like some kind of dashboard dog toy.
Because I think that for the left, and there are many liberals who buy into this, all human relations are power relations, right? You saw this in sort of Ezra Klein's response to Matt Iglesias, right? How did I end up on the same side as Matt Iglesias, a man I've called the Ralph Wiggum of the internet, right? Like, how has this happened? But Matt Iglesias had the temerity to sign that letter. And then Ezra Klein was like, there are a lot of people who stand up for free speech who are really doing this because it's a way of gaining power. And for a lot of people, this is on the left, this is how they think of things, right? All human relationships are power dynamics. There are no big principles that we all share, like freedom of speech matters.
You're right, in a way. There are no big principles that you and I share, like free speech matters, because I think free speech does matter, and you don't. You only wield it in order to gain some sort of mainstream acceptance and protection from criticism against your appalling ideas. But when it comes to countless other situations, you're totally against free speech. I wonder how you feel about pornography, Ben. You feel like that shouldn't really exist, and should be banned? That seems to me to be a massive violation of people's free speech. Because the truth is, you may say you care about free speech, but you don't. Because that's how the right operates. It's constantly, and by necessity, dishonest. And free speech only works when all parties are being on the level with each other. Otherwise, it's basically like giving a free license to those who are cheating the system to continue to do so. It's not an open marketplace of ideas if some people are breaking the advertising standards and ripping people off, pretending they're selling one thing when in fact they're selling something completely different.
Right, and I think that the liberal left has been somewhat warm to that argument for a while, at least warm enough that they were willing to hear it, and they just didn't see it turning on them at any point. The left moved so far so fast that the liberals were like, we were with you up until the point where you started canceling us. And then we realized, oh wait, that was a bad mistake, right? Iglesias was one of the guys who was like cheering on there's no cancel culture, cancellation doesn't exist, and then it came for him.
I'll let you in on a little secret. What cancel culture actually is, and why it's seeming to appear more prevalent in today's society, like more recently, it specifically exposes the reason that people like Ben are against it. Now, previously in the past, if there was a public figure who said something utterly appalling, racist, sexist, outrageous, something that, really annoyed you, what could you do? Well, you could write a letter to them specifically, which they could have their team filter out and chuck in the bin. You could write a letter to the newspapers, perhaps, and hope they printed it in the letters page, which nobody reads and nobody really took seriously, and also has to go through some kind of gatekeeper to see what kind of opinions are allowed to exercise their free speech. And quite often, if the newspaper's editorial opinion didn't mesh with your criticism, they would never print it. But now, if people have a problem with something that someone says, they can contact them directly through Twitter or put their opinions out there into the world without having to go through a gatekeeper, i.e. they can specifically exercise their free speech in a way that they couldn't in the past. They can circumvent the capitalist gatekeepers to allow their opinions to be heard. That's the only difference. And that is specifically what Ben Shapiro and other people who complain about cancel culture want to eradicate. They want to get rid of other people criticizing things that they don't like about what they, as public figures, as the elites, have done and said. So in fact, this talk against cancel culture is a kind of Orwellian doublethink. They act like they're arguing for free speech, when in fact what they're trying to do is just silence people who aren't holding the microphone at this time.
Like, where the hell are we at in this? Let's just talk about California for a second. I mean, we just, in the last couple of days, went into another freaking lockdown. It's beautiful outside. I'm not sure what the beach situation is, whether we can go there, but I know I can't go to a restaurant. It's like, what the hell is going on here at this point?
Well, we're in the middle of a pandemic, aren't we? I don't really understand how Dave Rubin's managed to miss this. He is stultifyingly ill-informed about nearly every subject, but I'd have thought he'd have gathered that that's happening. It is like all anyone is ever talking about on the news or just in daily life or anywhere, really. But also, that is an incredible segue from talking about cancel culture to talking about quarantine measures to help combat the epidemic. And it's as if, subtly, he's trying to link these two. If he was slightly brighter than he appears, I would say that this was quite a clever propaganda tactic to try and cast doubt on the measures people are putting in place to try and avoid getting everyone sick, trying to equivocate that to some kind of cancel culture without any evidence via the technique of segue. Although in Rave Dubin's case, it's probably more likely he's just wheeling around in his mind from all these high-level ideas, from one high-level idea to another, and genuinely just wants to know what's going on because he's so ill-informed. But madly, he's made the fatal mistake of asking Ben Shapiro to explain, well, anything to him at all.
It annoys me on the left when people treat mask wearing as though it's an incredible virtue signal. You're an evil, evil person if you're not wearing a mask when you go to sleep at night, and you're a better person if you wear a mask. And on the right, there are people for sure who are like, well, I'm not wearing a mask under any circumstance. It's a violation of my freedoms and all this kind of stuff. Like, look, just.
And here I think is one of the most interesting things that Ben Shapiro has said, certainly in this program. And what makes it so interesting is that obviously he's on the side of the right and he generally criticizes the left. And here he's presenting a sort of centrism argument, a sort of argument from enlightened centrism, where he's sort of criticizing both the left and the right being his side and the left being the enemy. And what you'll notice about his example imaginary people is that the opinions he ascribes to the left are gross exaggerations of what people on the left are saying. And there's nobody on the left saying that people should wear a mask while they sleep. And I know that Ben Shapiro knows this too. But what he's saying, the bad things that the right are saying, he knows and I know and we all know that the people on the right are actually saying. So this is a really interesting thing just psychologically. So he knows that his side is in the wrong on this. And I would suggest that, in fact, most of the time, he, in fact, is clever enough to know that his side and what he's doing is in the wrong, and yet he attempts to sell what he knows is wrong to the public. Because even though he doesn't believe it, he wants you to believe it.